will be turned off and the rest of the meeting's going to continue. With that, I'll shut up and I'll hand over to Anthony.
Sure. My name's Anthony, I'm an addict.
Okay.
I need to breathe. And the reason why I say that is because my nervous system gets deregulated quite easily. I suffer with a lot of trauma before I ever picked up a lot of drugs. And I think once you expose yourself to people that you don't know and you show people aspects of yourself, the paranoia kicks in. You're open to criticism, you're open to judgment, you're open to ridicule, you're open to being put down and laughed at. And that all comes from my childhood and it gets played out in the present. And I realise, the core of who I am is that I'm ashamed of who I am. That I'm not enough, that I'm defective, that I'm flawed, that I'm incomplete as a human being. Even though I'm a child of God, the internal dialogue is just one that berates me and tells me that I'm no good and that I'll never amount to anything. And sometimes it's really painful. And my stomach, before I do a show, I've been doing this a long time. Over 3 decades. But my stomach goes, my nervous system goes, my legs shake, my chest feels so tight. And it just feels like I've got to come out of my head and into the light and I'm going to be seen. And I think when you're seen, there's also that fear of abandonment, rejection, of people deserting you, people getting up and just leaving. Because that's my experience of life. I've always felt unloved, unwanted, uncared for. I always felt ugly. I always felt that I was never complete, that I was this misfit. And I think using was like the liquid glue that held me together. Even though it was like I had bracelets on and I was a slave and I was shackled to the drugs, it was the liquid glue that held me together. And as much as a solution, it became a problem because I turned into a monster. I trampled on anything and anyone that got in the way of my using, and I left a wake of destruction behind me. And it was emotional, it was spiritual, it was psychological, it was physical, it was financial, it was academical. But I broke my mum's heart. I left my mum in a state of anxiety and worry of never knowing when she's going to get the call to say that her son's dead. My daughter went out last night, she's 20 years of age, and she didn't come in, I don't know what time, and the anxiety, it's 12:30, it's 1:30, it's 2:30. My mum had that for 20 years, not knowing if I was going to come back. And I didn't, my relationship with my mum was fractious, but my mum loved me in her own way. But I didn't realise I was breaking her heart, that I was leaving her in a state of emotional turmoil. I didn't realise that. Because I thought it was all about me, the world evolved around me, I'm totally self-centred to the core. I didn't think I was hurting anybody. I neglected myself, I malnourished myself. I debased and degraded myself and I gave up everything for that hit. My body was a vehicle. It turned into an obscenity, something that I wanted put down. I wanted to be rid of it. I should go to bed each night, I just didn't want to wake up. I looked in the mirror and what I saw I hated. 20 years of using. 20 years of being institutionalised for one more hit. 20 years of neglecting my children. I always said I don't want to be like my dad who walked out when I was 2. I didn't want to be like my mum, emotionally unavailable. I was unavailable. I didn't show him any nurturing, any love, any care. All I cared about was having a hit. And I couldn't see it until I got clean. And it says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. And I think that's the first part of it. And I started to wake up because it was like I'd been in a coma for 20 years. I was in such denial, I couldn't see. My perspective of reality was so distorted because of my autobiography and history. My emotional and psychological filters were distorted. And I didn't have the mental apparatus that I've got now. I came in here illiterate, by the way. I couldn't read and write. And I was like an emotional retard. I didn't have any emotional literacy. I couldn't name a feeling. I couldn't put anything into words. I couldn't structure a sentence together. And I think in working the steps, because this step is about all 12 steps. And I've done that step 1, and I learned about the spiritual principle of acceptance, but I also learned the spiritual principle of humility. Because I was one of those people that said, yeah, but, and I know. I knew nothing about recovery, but I kept saying to people, I know, people want to smash the life out of me. They just want to smash the life out of me, and I kept saying, I know. And it says it on the sleeve of this book, and in the second chapter, it says, many books have been written about addiction. This one is written about recovery. It says, if you think you're an addict, give yourself a break and read it. And I've read it, and I've read it, and I've read it, and I forgot what I've read. And that's what I live with. I live with a disease of forgetfulness. But that step, you know, when I admitted how ignorant I really was, I became teachable. When I stopped saying, yeah, but, and I know, I became teachable. Because I'm defiant. I'm disobedient, I'm unruly, I'm obnoxious, you know, I'm all of those things and more. But the reality is I'm a contradiction, because I have been compliant, I have conformed, I have worked the steps, you know, I have been open-minded, I have been willing, I have been disciplined. You know, my clean date is November the 9th, 1995, and I haven't forgot where I've come from. I just haven't forgot where I've come from. And I think that step one showed me that I was a slave. I looked up the word addiction when I got here. You know, like all good recovering addicts, I stole the thesaurus, and I stole the dictionary off the nuns and the priests in a homeless hostel because I wanted to know what the word addiction meant. And it talks about to be enslaved, to be devoted, to be obsessive, to give your all. And if that means your life, you give your life. And I didn't realise I was prepared to give my life because it didn't have much value. And the reality is, I think when I got to the precipice of realising I wanted to die, I actually really wanted to live. I got to that place, I just thought, my life isn't worth anything. You know, I'm an obscenity that uses. It's over. There's no point going on. And I think there's something in me, the self-preservation, that says, you're worth more than this. You're worth so much more. And the reality is, you know, I met someone who took me through the 12 steps, and I just thought, the rules are, you don't think, you don't feel, you don't trust, you don't wash your laundry in public. A problem shared is a problem doubled. I'm Irish, by the way. I'm Irish Catholic. My dad's from the West Indies, from Barbados. My mum's from Limerick in Ireland. You know, I've got an Irish passport. I love it over there. But the reality is, you know, the rules are you don't divulge anything to anyone. You know, it's a law of a martyr. You don't have any feelings. If you have any feelings, you get battered for having those feelings. You're not allowed to feel. And it's like, I came here and I had to trust another man. My experience of men, they're violent. Men have really hurt me. They've left me in a gutter dead as an adult, and they battered me as a child because of who I am. I was born in 1960, and I remember people used to spit at my mum. Dirty, filthy greenies. They used to bring it up from their chest, spit on her, and the phlegm used to be falling off her glasses. And I knew I had a lot of anger. And the reality is, you know, the violence that I experienced from men, I had to get out of the way, and I had to allow someone to take me through the steps. And that step one opened my eyes up to the rest of the steps. There's 6 spiritual principles in step one. There's the honesty, open-mindedness and willingness, but the key ones are the surrender. I used every day, I need an everyday surrender. I needed to accept that I live with a disease that I will always have, and the humility is I need to be teachable every day. And I like that thing what Mahatma Gandhi says. He says, each night I go to bed, I die. Each morning I wake up reborn. And that's my recovery. And I think the hope in step 2, you know, that's the spiritual principle. Hope, faith and open-mindedness. That's 9 spiritual principles in the first 2 steps. And then I learnt about willingness again in step 3. But what changed my life was step 4. And the reality is if you had an expectation that you brought here today, that you was going to hear what you wanted to hear, it might be a resentment under construction. You might leave with resentment. It's okay. It's not mine, it's yours. You'll take it home. I'll sleep really well. But the reality is, that's what an unrealistic expectation is. And I had so many unrealistic expectations of other people. And the thing that really hurts me is, you know, we talk about the exact nature of our wrongs, which is our character defects. But what's underneath that is my low self-esteem. And then what's underneath that, if you want to go even deeper, is my interpersonal relationships with other people. It's a struggle. Because then when you write a step 4, it's about all the relationship, anybody who comes into contact with you. And I learnt about me, and I started to peel away at the onion layer and peel away at all the repression. And I saw the beauty inside of me. I weren't looking in the mirror at this ugly child anymore, or this ugly adult. You know, I was enough. And that's what the step 4 done. And this guy guided me, and he loved me until I could love myself, because, as I said, I came here with a lot of hatred. And I think sharing that in step 5, you know, someone who's got integrity, they listen to me. And it's like I had a voice. I had someone who listened to my testimony. Nobody wanted to hear my voice. I was told you look better in the dark, or you're to be seen and not heard. I didn't have a voice. I was invisible. I withdrew. I abandoned myself. And I can do that in recovery. I can abandon myself. And it's like, I've got a voice and I need to voice it. I need witnesses to what's going on. And I think my steps 6 and 7 showed me that as much as I've got character defects, I've got character assets. And I have to integrate the two. I'm not good, I'm not bad. I have assets and liabilities. And the reality is, I'm a human being, first and foremost. I'm perfectly imperfect. That's it. Love me for who I am, not who you would like me to be. And I know a lot of people have got issues around fix, manage and control. It's all right. You know, this is who I am. And I think, for me, my step 8 was about my children. You know, writing letters to my children with my left hand. You know, I abandoned 5 children. You know, I've got 2 children in recovery. They're 20 and 22. And they're growing up, and I've been a dad. You know, and I cut the umbilical cord at Wormwood Scrubs, overlooking the reception area into the prison. I was in Queen Charlotte Hospital, and I smelt my children each time they were born, and cut the cord, and the purity and the essence of beauty. I've never experienced anything like it. It was like a little fish coming out. It was just amazing. And I was looking over the yard, and I spent 20 years in and out of institutions so as I could have a hit. And here I am holding this child. This child's 22 now. She's off in Thailand and then Cambodia and Vietnam. You know, it's like 1 minute they're on your shoulder, you're winning them, you know, you're changing them, you're loving them and you're caring for them. And the next thing you know, South America, Thailand, you know, my daughter's just done a law degree. I come from a council estate. I mean, I went and got a degree as well in recovery, but my daughter going and getting one, and my other daughter's doing one as well. And it's like, that's what we do. We become dads in it. You know, I gave, you know, through that step 8 and 9, I made amends to my mum. I gave my mum her son back. I paid the debt to my mum. 24 years I gave my mum of being consistent, reliable, dependable, and I just loved on her. And I watched her die of cancer, and I watched her gargle for her last breath, and I just used to sit at the end of the bed, and she said I couldn't go. I don't want to be resuscitated. I don't want to be brought back to life. I can go. I'm okay, I'm at peace, I don't have to worry anymore. And that's the 9th step, that's the power of the steps. You know, I gave my 2 daughters a father, I gave my brothers a brother. You know, I became I was a good husband for a certain amount of time, and then that didn't work out. But that was great. You know, but I was a great dad, and I still am. And it's like, you know, I watched my brother die last year, brain cancer. You know, his prefrontal cortex he couldn't even stand up. He went paralysed, he went blind, and he was living in the front room with his pals just puffing. And I said, how are you going to the toilet? He said, I'm not. He said, I'm going in the garden. He said, I can't get up the stairs to wash. He said, I'm using a wet wipe. And I you know, I had some conflict with my brother, but I still had to get him into a hospice. I didn't leave the house until I got him into a hospice. Even though I got ill feelings, and he gave his house and all his money to his pals, it didn't matter. What mattered was that I had some integrity, and that I was dignified. And I got him into a hospice, and he died in the hospice. 53. And that's what the power of the steps does, because it's about having a spiritual awakening. It's no longer about me anymore. You know, my step 10, I do a journal every morning, because I live with me, and it's like a war zone in my head. the internal conflict. People talk about you put down the drugs, the war's over. It's just begun. It's just begun, because then the spiritual warfare starts. And for me, it's me and my head. And it goes, I wake up to obsession, imagination, fantasy, delusion, deceit, lies of people that are no longer here anymore. They're in my past, but I'm still obsessing about them, believing that it's still on. No, they've been gone a long time. They ain't coming back. And 5 minutes. And what it does is it gives me clarity. I can see myself, because my disease isn't outside of me. It's between my two ears, and it's working while I'm asleep. It's like an office, and they're thinking of ingenious ways of manoeuvring me out the door. That's their primary purpose, my head. And they come up with some great ideas, fabulous ideas to separate me from you. They look for all the differences. I always used to talk about the isms. The ism is that thing at the end of the thing, judgmentalism, ISM. I separate myself. So it comes up in classism when I first come here, going to meetings in Chelsea, the class difference. It comes up in intellectualism, and then it comes up in all the other isms you can think of, whether it's socialism, conservatism, Marxism, nihilism, genderism, sexism, racism. It finds a fucking ism. Sorry, I don't mean to swear because it's being recorded. It finds an ism, but I know it's the disease. The disease, its primary purpose is to get me out the door so as I can listen to the propaganda in my head. Radio Anthony propaganda. I read a book, and I hope the NA police are not here, and it's called Embracing Your Inner Critic. And I also read another book, it's called A Soul Without Shame. And one talks about turning the radio noise down, and the other one talks about shrinking the noise. But when I write that journal on my 10th step, the noise comes down. The madness comes down, and I come back into reality, and I realise where I am. And I have some small wins in the morning: a shave, a shower, make the bed, have a cup of tea, put the eggs on, put the toast on. Just some small wins so as I can get some motivation. And I write them down, and I write a gratitude list down. And the reason why I do it, because my disease hasn't gone anywhere. It's older than my recovery. It's read the literature with me. So it has to use that against me. It weaponises it. Any chink in that literature, it will turn it on me. And that's why it's good to have a step 10. And my step 11 is like you've got 4 surrenders. You've got a surrender in step 1, where you surrender to the drugs. You've got a surrender in step 3, where you hand your will and life over to the care of God. And then you've got a surrender in step 6 and 7, where you deflate your ego. And then the 4th surrender is in the 11th step, where you have a conscious contact with a God or a higher power in your understanding, where you have become more aware, where you're consciously aware, you mature into a higher level of consciousness. And then it says in step 11, before you get to step 12, it says we give freely and gratefully what was freely and gratefully given to me. And then we pass the message on. What is our message? That an addict, it's also linked to tradition 5. It says that any addict can stop using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. When all is said and done, that's the only message we've got. But one of the questions in the step working guide is about, have you been an experience of someone being of service? A woman 12-stepped me on a plane after I'd been in a crack house all night with my fingers all burnt, absolutely paralytic drunk. She 12-stepped me and brought me to meetings for 18 months. She put her house up for my bail, my probation, my day leave. She was my friend. And at 27 years clean, she put a rope around her neck and hung herself. But she left a legacy. She passed it on to me, and I passed it on to so many people, and they passed it on to someone else, and they passed it on to someone else. I've still got a service commitment. I still sponsor a lot of men. And I do it because it makes me feel better about myself. I don't do it with my ego or my pride or to tell people what a good boy I am, because I am not a good boy, I can assure you. I'm just me. And the reality is, by doing that, I've stayed. I've stayed. And that's what it says at the beginning of this book. People tell you keep coming back. If you read the preface, in the preface it says, please stay. Please stay. Don't leave. And I remember Anne-Marie she used to come to meetings, and I remember hearing her say, because she said, don't leave before the miracle happens. And the miracle happens is, you know, I was someone who's a drug addict who used for 20 years, and I haven't used for over 30 years. And I still come to meetings because I still live with a disease. It's really patient. It's got all the time in the world. It will give you enough rope, literally, to hang yourself. It will let you go and do whatever you want to do, but there's consequences, as long as you're prepared to pay the price. And the reality is, sometimes I've been in recovery, I've been clean, but I ain't been in recovery. I've been very troubled and very disturbed, and I've been up to no good. And there's other times where I'm just on it. At the moment, I'm on it, because it's on me. It's on me, because what it does is, it also uses your clean time against you. It uses your clean time against you to separate you. And I'll finish on this. When I got clean and I went to prison for a couple of years, I was 111 days clean, and I used to listen to cassette tapes. And there was a guy on there called Tim, and he always quoted this guy called Andre. And what the guy said, he says, the heavens fall silent each time a newcomer walks into the room, because a human being is being restored to dignity. And I think through the 12 steps, I've been restored to dignity, and thanks for letting me share. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.